Hey, everybody, Dave Dubeau here with another episode of Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. Today, zooming in is a branding expert and a gentleman who knows all about helping us real estate weirdos brand ourselves better. So, Paul Copcutt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so let's kind of start big picture because everybody hears this term bantered around. Branding. What does branding mean to a brander?
Well, I think the best description I ever heard was Jeff Bezos said it, was a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Oh, that could be scary.
Well, and there's a good point about brand is, what are people saying? Is it good or is it bad? And whatever they're saying is building up people's perception of your brand, good or bad.
Okay, so what people are saying about you when you're not in the room, but what would be like a more concrete definition of a brand, perhaps, that we can get our head around? Because, obviously there's a lot involved with it, but what are you thinking of primarily, at least for the starting point, the starting block for people to brand themselves better?
Yeah, so I think from a personal brand point of view, you want to be offering a product, a service, or even a person. So a lot of real estate investors are solo or small micro businesses. So product, service, or person for which people feel there is no substitute.
Yeah. So again, let's say we're all real estate investors here.
Right.
Let's say I'm Joe Smith and I'm doing flips in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Right.
So what would branding mean in that case?
So there's going to be other people that are doing flips. So let's take a flip person, for example, as your example.
Yeah.
So a good flipper is going to know the budget. They're going to be on top of the numbers.
Yeah.
They're going to have good contractors, or they're going to do it themselves and they're a good contractor. So they could do good work. And they're going to be on time, because you want a flip to be on time, because otherwise the money starts to disappear from the deal
real quick. Yeah.
So we'll assume that those are what I call the table stakes. They get you in the game. They get you considered as a good flip real estate investor.
So you got the foundation. You've got the fundamentals down.
Right.
You know what you're doing. You're doing a decent job. All right.
Right. So that doesn't differentiate our flipper in Moose Jaw to somebody else in Moose Jaw that says they flip properties. So what they need to get clear on, what the listener needs to get clear on, is what are the emotional attributes underneath that differentiate you from somebody else? So are you the friendly flipper? Are you the humorous flipper? Are you the quirky flipper? Maybe you're the creative flipper. You always come up with something that turns that flip into a wow project. So then you can start to position your brand as, I'm the flipper that delivers on time, on budget, and with a wow factor. Then that starts to differentiate you. Then you can, and then there's a million ways for you to show that to people. And so when people are comparing, it doesn't boil down to the commodity side of things and numbers and money, but it comes down to, wow, do I want a flip project that does this? Or do I want a flip project that takes it up to here and sells for more dollars, or whatever it is?
Good. Okay, that's that. I'm starting to see the light now, Paul. That's good. Now I'm just thinking, okay, I'm Joe Schmo doing the flips in Moose Jaw, and I've been doing it for a couple of years. I'm not blowing anybody's socks off. I'm not the biggest flipper in town. I'm not the smallest flipper in town. I'm doing a good job. How would I kind of dial in what differentiates me? Because I think a lot of people might be thinking, well, I do flips, or I do burrs, or I buy small multis or whatever, but they don't really know what makes them different or special. How would we get some insight into that if we can't see it ourselves?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very common thing, because I also find that the things that people do so naturally and so well, their unique strengths, they never see them because they do it so naturally. They just never.
It's like in my case, people confuse me with Ryan Reynolds on a regular basis. I just can't help being so darn good looking and modest. So, I know it's
that must be a tough thing to handle, I think.
It's a hard road to haul. That's for anyhow. All seriousness, yeah. Sometimes we don't see our own strengths. So I interrupted you. You were going to give us some suggestions on how to dial that in.
Yeah, so there are assessments out there that you can do, self-assessments, but what I find is probably even more valuable is to go to 5, 10 people that you know well. They don't need to know you as well as a spouse or a partner, but they need to know you pretty well.
Yeah.
And say, what are the things that you think I do well? And conversely, what are the things I don't do so well?
Your spouse can help you. Your spouse or your partner can help you with that one.
Well, for sure. So I always think it's important to know what your weaknesses are as well, because you'll never make them a strength, but at least you can maybe play them down a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's always interests me when I do that with clients. They come back and they say, well, people have said I do this. And I said, well, do you? And they said, well, yeah, but I never thought it was a strength. Because
What would be an example? Like what pops into your mind of a client that kind of popped out for them?
Well, so let's continue to take our flipper and muse jaw.
Sure.
Maybe the flipper and muse jaw is fantastic at creating that vision of the flip in front of the investor or the person that's doing the flip, on the back of a napkin, and they can creatively show a picture of what the flip's going to look like.
So they can explain it. They can explain the concept really, really
right.
well.
Yeah, really visually, really easily, and that people get it straight away. So that's something that maybe somebody does all the time, but they just don't see it as a strength. I think the other side of it, though, the more important part is the emotional piece. So we talked about the funny flipper or the quirky flipper. You don't need to be funny or quirky to be a good flipper, but it differentiates you. If you think about, if the listener thinks about any brand that they know or love, the chances are it's not about the product or service they're buying, it's the emotional connection they've made to that brand. Apple is a great example. Starbucks is the perfect example of a brand where people will drive past 5 Tim Hortons to get to a Starbucks. All those stores, or vice versa. Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. So, but people, it's not about the coffee, because you could get coffee in any one of those. It's how you feel, how that brand makes you feel. So you engage with that brand. So that takes you above the table stakes. Your emotional attributes will be the reasons why somebody wants to hire you, work with you, or loan you investment money versus somebody else, because they've made that emotional connection. And equally, sometimes that emotional connection is not there and it's not a good fit. And it's equally good to know that and go away from the project, because it's going to be right. It's going to be a nightmare project, and it's going to be so if you're a flipper who's kind of a little bit seat of the pants type flipper and is kind of changes things on the fly, and you've got a client who's a micromanager, that's not going to be a great fit. And vice versa. If you're a flipper that's into the real details, but somebody just wants to get to the end project, that's probably not going to work as a good partnership either.
Wow, that's another fantastic idea. Hold on to that thought for a sec. We'll be right back. Now, are you a real estate investor who's run out of cash or credit to grow your portfolio? Are you looking to grow your portfolio using other people's money and raising capital? Well, I want to show you how to raise 6 figures or more in 6 weeks or less at my upcoming Investor Attraction Workshop. You can get your ticket and find out all about it at investorattractionworkshop.com. We're going to spend a full day taking a deep dive into this roadmap that I've used to raise millions for my deals, and I've helped other people just like you cumulatively raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for their deals as well. So again, you can check that out at investorattractionworkshop.com. And as a loyal listener to the podcast, you'll get 50% off your ticket when you use the discount code podcast. That's right. Discount code podcast at investorattractionworkshop.com. See you at the next workshop. Okay, so let's pretend we're Joe, the flipper, and we've asked 5 people, and we've come up with this commonality that a lot of people say that we're pretty good at explaining how the whole process works. How do I turn that into some kind of branding? And then what do I do with that? How do I, because we look at Starbucks and we look at Apple. Well, those are multi-billion-dollar companies that have a marketing budget greater than a lot of small nations. So, I mean, what do we do as an individual, as a micro business per se?
Well, the chances are that a lot of your business might come from referral or recommendation. So if you can get very clear about what it is you do, who you do it for, and why you're different, hopefully in 10 to 12 words, that's easy for somebody to remember.
Yeah.
So, I'm Joe the Flipper who's on budget, on time, and I make you laugh.
Yeah.
Then I'm the funny flipper. But then people will say, who do you like working with when you do flips? You say, well, you've got to work with Joe because he's great. He does a great project, but he's also great fun to work with. Then it's much more likely Joe's going to get recommended or remembered versus Fred, who's just fumbling along.
Doesn't do anything. Yeah, it doesn't do anything.
And then you can take that a stage further in terms, you don't need a big marketing budget. We've got access to social media. That's typically where people are checking you out nowadays. You could go on Facebook. So Joe the Flipper could do a Friday funny on, post a flipping joke or a real estate joke every Friday, and people start to get to know Joe for that. Obviously there's
fun with flips with Joe or something like that.
Right, exactly. So that's much better than doing. Everybody loves to see the befores and afters, but everybody does that. And then when you see somebody, and I see somebody do this on Facebook on a regular basis, they go and post the same before and after in every Facebook group they're in. So when I open my Facebook, I get 10 posts of the same person with the same befores and afters. And I'm going, oh, really? It doesn't endear me to that person. I'm kind of going, I'm going to snooze them for 30 days because all I'm going to see for the next 10 days is their project being, coming up in these groups.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's Friday and I'm thinking, oh yeah, Joe's going to have his joke on Friday. I wonder what the funny is today from Joe. Much more likely I'm going to engage.
So Paul, I know you've been doing this for quite some time. Can you maybe walk us through, and you don't necessarily need to use anybody's name for privacy purposes, but an example of a real estate client that you've worked with, kind of walk us through the story, where they started out and how branding really benefited them and kind of, hopefully took them to another level or to the next level. Do you have any, does anything pop into your mind? I'm sure.
Yeah, there is. And it's funny because, and it's a story that's out there. So
then doesn't down. Let's use names. Go ahead.
We can use that. So if you know Sarah, I'm sure you do. You know Sarah Larby
very well. Yeah, she's a very, very sharp real estate entrepreneur and a podcaster and one of the co-founders of the Right Club.
Right.
Yep.
And there's a classic use of an attribute, Dave, that you used about. So we all know Sarah's a Burr expert. Mm-hmm. But you said she's a sharp real estate investor. So sharp. Immediately in my mind, I conjure a picture, I'm going to get, and that's exactly what I would think with Sarah. She's no nonsense. She's sharp. She gets the job done. She's likable. She's accurate. She's knowledgeable. All those good things, which you would want from a good real estate investor. But she's sharp. She's on the button, and she doesn't take nonsense. I think that would be another thing she'd probably be fair to say. So when Sarah came to me, and she was the first real estate investor I got involved in, she found me on LinkedIn. She saw my profile. She said, "You seem to have a good profile. You seem to know what you're talking about. I need some help with my brand. And can you help me?" And I said, "Well, what do you have at the moment?" And at the time, she had her Burr portfolio that was building, and she had the podcast, but she had no social media, didn't really have a website or presence apart from for the podcast. And we sat down and I said, "Okay, so what are your goals? Where do you want to go with this? What's your vision?" And she said, I want to retire at 35. I want to quit 9 to 5. And I was kind of, whoa, that's quite a big vision. But she was clear about that. She was very focused on whatever it was going to take. So that's when we started working together 4 or 5 years ago. And October 2020, she quit her 9 to 5. Nice. So we basically took the podcast, we built the website, And then she wanted to do coaching programs. That was kind of the main driver for her coming to me was, people are starting to ask for help. I don't know how to put a coaching program together. What do I do? What are the things it should entail? She had all the information, of course. She had the knowledge. It was just a case of packaging it correctly and positioning it correctly. And so that's what we've been able to do, is basically enable her to replace her corporate income from, with real estate income beyond the real estate investments. And now, of course, she's having that vision was a thing that's continued to carry Sarah to her next evolution, I think, because now she's in developments and new builds, and she's got this resort that she's developing with partners. So it's great to see her, continue to grow. She hasn't kind of settled for that 9 to 5 quitting in October 2020. She's at the next level and going further. So perfect. I think that's a good example.
So somebody's watching this, Paul, and they say, well, it's sounding kind of like I should pay attention to this whole branding thing. What's a good place for somebody to start? Would you recommend any resources? Is like I'm talking about basic branding 101 type stuff. Get started with this. What would you recommend to people?
Yeah, I would recommend picking up a book called The Charismatic Brand by Marty Neumeier. He's an ad agency guy. It's a very easy, quick read, but it really gets the point across around brand and also differentiated brand. How you need to start thinking about how can I be, the brand that nobody else can find anywhere else. I think that's a great place to kick off. I would certainly do something like Strengths Finder if you're not familiar with your strengths and you're not getting the feedback that you want from the 5 people or 10 people you're going to ask. That's a great assessment to take. Those would be a good couple of places to kick off with.
Fantastic. Well, Paul, it's always fascinating discussing branding and marketing and talking to sharp folks like yourself. So if people want to find out more about you and what you're up to, why don't you move your shoulders so you can show us a little bit of your branding?
Wrong way. There we go.
reibranded.com. Is that the best place for people to find you?
Yep, that's where they'll find me. That's where they'll find the podcast, and that's probably a good place to start. So.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it. Thanks for your wisdom.
Thanks for having me today. Have a great day. Thanks.
All right, everybody, take care. See you on the next episode. Well, hey there. Thanks for tuning into the Property Profits podcast. If you like this episode, that's great. Please go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. Give us a good review. That'd be awesome. I appreciate that. And if you're looking to attract investors and raise capital for your deals, then I'm going to invite you to get a complimentary copy of my newest book, right back there. There it is. The Money Partner Formula. You can get a PDF version at investorattractionbook.com. Again, investorattractionbook.com. Take care.